So Julie Royce is a battle axe of a journalist, fake journalist, and she hates all men everywhere, menopausal, angry, and just really bad at doing her job as a journalist. Hates John MacArthur for some reason because she's famous for taking down James MacDonald, the Elephant Room, all of that, or the Elephant's Debt, all that. Here's the ironic part. John MacArthur was warning the world about James MacDonald long before Julie Royce had a job. So it's like she's not respecting her elders. And she hates men. She's a she-man woman hater, or she-man man hater. She
likes certain kinds of men. If the men are servile and soft and
spelt like a dolphin.
Right. If they automatically assume that whatever they say is wrong and whatever a woman says is right, then I'm sure she's just fine with them.
Yeah, the betas. She's a beta kind of gal. Yeah. Yeah. As long as they're she's wearing the pants. So anyways, fill us in here on Julie Royce.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't read her article or my article, she basically takes a 20-year-old case of a married couple. We talked about this on the podcast before, and dredges it back up to use it to attack John MacArthur because apparently there was video that somebody took at a private, I'm going to call it private because it was the communion part of the worship service where Grace Community Church turns off the camera, stops recording. Somebody had brought a camcorder into that service to record whatever John MacArthur was going to say. And now she's using that to say MacArthur shamed and excommunicated a woman because she wouldn't go back to her abusing husband.
This was like 2 weeks ago.
What, the video?
Yeah.
20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I was being facetious.
I did not.
This is 20 years ago.
Well, and I did not realize at the time that I was writing the article, this was in 2002, before camera phones, before smartphones, and the age of everybody having a camera in their pocket.
Would be excellent at treasure hunting because you just got to dig down and down and down and down. Eventually, you're going to find something like an arrowhead or an Indian's head or something. If you just dig down deep enough, she's deep diving 20 years down the mine shaft to find something wrong with Grace Community Church, which in turn impugns the elders of Grace Community Church. And in this story, that then impugns John MacArthur. So we're 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon here. So she and 20 years away.
Right.
So congratulations, 20 years. In 20 years, you found a scandal, Julie. Well, let's see how big of a scandal it is.
It's funny because the prior attack articles on
journalist hack.
Yeah.
Let's see how big of a deal it is.
Well, and the worst part, the more I dig into this, because I didn't let it, after I wrote my article, I kept digging because it just doesn't smell right. You know what I mean? When you have that instinct that like something isn't right, something doesn't add up here.
Let's let facts be facts here. On Twitter, we're not that popular because nobody wants to quote us on Twitter because then they get yelled at by people who don't want to see us followed on Twitter. But we have more readership, listenership than Julie Royce does. David, let me ask you, have you ever gone 20 years back in time or seen us go 20 years back in time to come up with an inflammatory story about one of our subjects?
We don't have time for that. There's too much going on right now.
like Willie Rice.
Yeah, that's right. There are things to be discerned right now and be polemicized right now.
20 years to find a supposed scandal. Let's see how scandalous it is.
Well, and part of this is because the husband.
Go back 20 years. I expect to see John MacArthur women wearing women's underwear or something impressive.
Yeah.
Not this garbage.
Right. Well, and what happened? This isn't in my article. She's supposedly going to write a follow-up article to this, and I will probably respond to that in kind. There might be
women underwear.
But here's the funny thing is, I'm going to tell you what she's going to quote unquote break in her next article. I'm going to tell you what it is right now. She hasn't published the article, but I'm going to tell you what it is. She is going to reveal that David Gray, who's the husband in prison, he's not her husband anymore, but the guy in prison started a prison ministry upon getting to prison and was reporting positive evangelism, and people coming to Christ and these kinds of things in a newsletter. And John MacArthur purportedly wrote a little blurb of encouragement to him while he was in prison. This is going to be her next breaking story. Is John MacArthur was supporting the jailed child molester. That's going to be her breaking. Of course, this is 20 years old.
Forsooth. Forsooth. I email David, Kevin Height, who's in jail for child molestation and worked with HeartCry for years. And because he was a friend of mine, and he's still a friend of mine, even though he's not the person that I thought that he was at the time. And maybe I'm a bad guy. Maybe if somebody goes to jail, we just forget about him. But I'm pretty sure there's some verses in Scripture about not doing that. Like, aren't we told to visit the imprisoned and to care about the imprisoned?
Well, no, not if they get thrown in prison for purportedly abusing children, we should just throw them into hell right now. I mean, clearly they're beyond Jesus's power.
I'm all for killing them. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for stringing them up. But if you're not going to string them up, then you give them a chance at redemption. It's either death or redemption. I did this lecture to my daughter for like 6 hours in the car the other day about child molesters and everybody else, bank robbers. You either let them be redeemed or you kill them. Give them a choice: redemption, or execution. And we
should not forget. There's a couple little details that she left out of this article that I think are really important.
No way.
Yeah. Shocking, right?
It wasn't exhaustive.
No, it wasn't.
It's almost like she just wanted to attack John MacArthur.
The funny thing is, if you removed the wife's testimony. If you remove the wife's testimony from Julie Roy's article, the article doesn't exist. It vaporizes. 90% of her article is the testimony of the wife, which I'm not necessarily saying is true or untrue, but she characterized it like this is established fact that anybody can go back and say, well, duh, of course we knew this.
Apparently,
we don't know.
Apparently, a jury, right, found the wife's testimony on some things to be compelling.
Right, and that's part of what I'm going to fill you in on here.
If we're innocent until proven guilty, then we can assume that he's guilty. I think, right? Can't we? I mean, we can assume that.
Yeah, because nobody ever has a conviction overturned, do they? That's the thing. Like, well, yeah, OJ was found innocent, so I guess he must not have done it, right? I mean, it's provable fact now. It's like, okay, let's not get out over our skis. But she leaves out a couple important things. Number one, the husband maintains his innocence on the sex abuse charges. To this day, he says, I didn't do that. And there was no physical evidence that he did. That was another part of the part of the red flag for me, was there's no evidence of this. And I realize that in a lot of these kind of cases, especially when the accusations come to light with children years down the road, there can't be any physical evidence. But it's something that readers probably should have been aware of. The other part of this, other than it's
something that women and mothers should be aware of.
Yeah.
Can I just, hey Julie Royce, let me just really tick you off. It's the mom's fault that this happened if this actually happened. Yeah. Because that's the mom's role.
Yeah,
to protect the kids.
Right. How did she not know? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to re-adjudicate, but she definitely bears some responsibility. And
there's some patriarchy for you, lady.
Yeah. Well, she's a survivor and a victim now, so she can't possibly have sinned in any way during this process. That's something
because
you need to accept.
Victim, you lose all sinner status when you're.
That's what I said. Yeah, that's what I told Tim earlier. I said as soon as you can reliably call yourself a victim or even a survivor, depending on how politically useful you are, you get a get out of sin free card. You can't possibly be a sinner anymore. And the other part of this, I think people really need to realize,
is why the social gospel, which turns everyone into the oppressed victim, is gospelless. That's why there's no gospel in the social gospel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you're wondering why that's so wrong.
Yep. All of a sudden, there's some of us who bear original sin and others of us who don't, depending on our category. The other part of this I think is important is he was originally charged with abusing 2 out of 3 of the kids and acquitted on abusing 1 of the kids. So he was found guilty of abusing
he
1 out of 3 kids.
He had been falsely accused, according to the court, at least once.
According to the court, he had been falsely accused of abusing the youngest kid and convicted of abusing the middle child. And the older child there were no charges brought against him for sexually abusing the older child, although her testimony was, it looks like, primary to what led to his conviction because of the earlier corporal punishment type abuse. So, without digging too deeply into it, there are other parts of this narrative that are raising red flags for me.
Is corporal punishment abuse?
The court considered it to be abuse, and from what the children and the wife described, it certainly made it seem like it was a little over the top. Again, I'm reading this document 20 years in the future. So it's
okay.
But there are red flags, and certainly the biggest part that should be taken away is there's not a narrative to take this.
I think you can only beat your children with a feather in California.
Yeah, it's possible. Well, and I don't want to defend what he did or didn't do. I have no idea. I mean, I have some idea from what I've read.
I don't want to defend him. I could be defending a pedophile. I don't want to defend him.
Yeah.
I do want Julie Royce to go, I don't know, build a parapet for her husband to live on the roof, because she's got to be insufferable.
It must. Well, he's got to be scared to death that he's going to, do something abusive, maybe, talk a little too loudly at some point, and he's going to find himself in an article next.
She's going to let him out of the cage at the foot of the bed one of these days, and he's going to just make a break for it.
Yeah. So, but I'm going to keep following this because I still smell a rat. Can I put it that way? I still think that there's something totally suspicious about this. And with Julie Roy's track record, she's not credible at all. I mean, she's got Kyle J. Howard on a podcast. How credible can you be?
MacArthur was trying to do not MacArthur, the elders of the church, excluding MacArthur, because it's a big church. You got multiple elders. They're not all involved in all the situations there. Tried doing Matthew 18 reconciliation. It turned out to be an abuse situation. It was of the elder's opinion that the woman was not following Matthew 18, not attempting to reconcile.
And that could still be true, by the way. There's been no evidence presented that isn't true.
John MacArthur takes the words of his elders.
Right.
And then has some words to say for her in regard to this closed service, and to not embarrass her before the world, they turn the cameras off,
like they always do,
as a church privately. And by the way, I want to 100% commend any mega church that does church discipline publicly. I've never even heard of such a thing. Congratulations to Grace Community Church. That's awesome. So the court, though, the civil magistrate, differed from JMac and the elders that gave him that information and said this guy is guilty.
Much later.
Many years later. Months later.
It was what, a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. Basically, the bigger allegations didn't come to light until mid 2003. So it was about a year later.
She didn't fill in the elders on this sexual abuse then.
Right. It wasn't until the kids started going to counseling and therapy with a psychologist outside of the church that these allegations come to light. I know what you're thinking, because I'm kind of thinking the same thing, which is why I'm not letting this go.
Yeah.
I'm not alleging yet. I don't know. But what I do know is that she was told with a letter. She was told with a letter from the elders saying, because you are being unwilling to reconcile here, we are going to exercise this next step of church discipline at the service on this date. So she's told by the elders in a letter, this is when this is happening. And magically, somebody shows up to this service with a camcorder.
She seems like a very contrite and sincere woman. So let's talk worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is the elders biffed it. They were wrong 20 years ago. John MacArthur stood with his elders. The guy is a scumbag. It got handed to the courts. The courts figured out he's a scumbag although only a partial scumbag because he was exonerated on one count. He goes to jail, starts a ministry.
Yeah, we can verify that. That's verifiable.
Instead of a drug dealing operation.
Yep.
And John MacArthur's like, well, at least this good's coming from it.
Mm-hmm.
And is that worst case scenario?
That's, yeah. From what I can tell from the evidence, that's worst case scenario.
That sounds to me like that's also the best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other worst case scenarios, by the way, that nobody's really talked about yet is
that he's innocent.
Yeah. What if he's innocent? That's possible. I'm not saying one way or the other, but in a case where there's no physical evidence and the charges don't come out until a while later.
When we do our news, you know, I'll wake up, look at the feedly, and Greg and Jerry are looking at the feedly, our news team. They're looking through stuff, and it's like, has this been published yet by Fox? Has this been published yet by Gateway Pundit, Zero Hedge? Has this been published yet by Capstone Report? And if it's already out there, we don't really care to deal with it if they have the right take, you know. That's important enough a story. I told Dustin to pick it up from Capstone because we don't want the Willie Rice thing to go away. And plus, we really hate it when people canonize stuff. So, ordinarily, if it's old news, you and I don't touch it, right? Like at Mile High Evening News, if it's a week old, that might as well be a year old. Right? It's only news if it's new. Why would a journalist go after something 20 years old? You tell me.
Yeah, because this subject matter is emotionally jarring in 2022. It's because it fits the narrative, it fits the abuse narrative, and
there is a demand to take out John MacArthur, one of the last remaining stalwarts of the conservative resurgence, and Julie Roys works for the devil.